Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Real Spiritual Talk Radio. I am your host, Lamont Gates, once again bringing you the world of faith, metaphysicality, and spirituality. Today, my guests learned that all were unified into one. Ladies and gentlemen, joining me today is near-death experiencer, Miss Lucy Lockdown. Lucy, welcome to Real Spiritual Talk Radio.
Hi, Lamont. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. No problem at all. I thank you for coming on to share your account with the rest of us. Now, Lucy, I understand that your account was pretty amazing. It pretty much verified what you believed prior. Is that correct?
Yes. I grew up in a Pentecostal household, and that really never jived with me. But in my teens, I started to believe that, we are infinite beings of light, and we all, everything is energy, just the whole scientific view on it all. And then, when I was up there, I came back and I was like, holy crap, we are all infinite beings of light and everything is energy. So it was definitely the evidence that I personally needed to have a life-changing experience.
Absolutely fascinating. And we're going to get into that experience. But first, let's walk backwards. Let's talk a little bit about those religious belief systems, your prior Pentecostal upbringing. Tell me what it was that you liked about it or did not like about it.
Well, I will preface that I am on the autism spectrum disorder, or on autism spectrum. And, even as a child, a small child, I was very logical. And a lot of the things that the Pentecostal church was saying, I just didn't have evidence for in my little kid brain. And I just could not accept a lot of this stuff. And it was actually very traumatizing. I had a lot of PTSD from growing up in that church because all they ever taught was the rapture. And, if you haven't asked Jesus to, save you of your sins, then you're going to hell and you're going to burn in a pit of fire. And, little kids soak that in. And it was definitely, started a lot of my anxiety issues as a child.
So in other words, you were partaking in what many of us would call fear-based religion at the time.
Oh, definitely. Yes.
Now, I understand that you said in your teenage years, you began to realize that we were something more than just flesh. So, even though you didn't do the religious thing, you still had some sort of belief that this energy in some way, shape, or form was immortal. Why don't you talk a bit about that in your teenage years?
Yes. Well, I never went full atheist. I never did that, even though, because I felt like that's still saying you have the evidence that nothing exists. And, I was very evidence-based. And, growing up, I also, I've had instances where I have seen spirits, and different forms of spirits. Not a lot, but enough to make me realize, okay, there's something more out there, whether not just this dimension, another dimension, there's something more than just this 3D version of us. And then I really got into Buddhism because, now looking back, I'm like, man, I was very naive about Buddhism though, too, because of how deep it went. But I was more of a surface Buddhist, like, hey, just be kind to everybody. I believed in reincarnation and, just be kind, and karma is real. And so I really just kind of held on to that most of my life up until January 21st, 2020. And that's when I had my experience.
Fascinating. So why don't we move into that experience? How old were you when you had your near-death experience, and what was it that triggered it?
I was 41, and it's kind of a layered, long story, so I'll try to make it as short as possible. I have an autoimmune disorder called ankylosing spondylitis, and it causes inflammation in your joints and organs. and I had a very severe flare up, and it caused severe inflammation in my stomach. And I was not able, the first 2 weeks, I could barely even sip on water. I could not get anything into my stomach. And, I spent 2.5 months of daily, maybe getting a quarter of a cup of water and in my system, and then maybe some like tapioca pudding or a hard-boiled egg. And also, I'm allergic to anti-inflammatories, so I there was really not anything that I could take for it. And I think also with my autism, and also maybe some abuse growing up, I've always been told to just suck it up and push through and just deal with it. And so that's what I was doing. I was just trying to push through and deal with it. And, I was very weak, but, to me, I was like, well, I'm just one form of weak today, and eventually after 2.5 months, it caught up with me. And, and I wasn't working. I couldn't work. I wasn't able to. And that last week, I really just, my body started to shut down, and I live by myself. So, here's me and my cats just hanging out on the couch. And, oh, well, I did have some divine intervention even before my near-death experience. On October 31st, so just a couple months, it was when I had one of the severe pains from it. I was having a panic attack because of the severe pain, and I didn't know what to do. And I was standing in my living room, and all of a sudden there was this gold light to the left of me. And I heard clear as day in my left ear, not one more drop of alcohol. And I used to drink almost every day to combat my anxiety and my physical pain. But I haven't drank since,
Right.
so that's a blessing. Sorry, this is kind of emotional to talk about, but I'm getting through it. Well, anyway, so that week before I had the near-death experience, I remember laying on my couch and just having my eyes closed and just seeing this bright white light. And I would think, did I leave the overhead light on? Did I leave my TV on? And I would open my eyes and it was pitch black in my living room, in the house. And so I feel like that was the beginning of it, of me kind of leaning towards that, that realm. And so one day I just felt like I was slipping away, and I called out for help. I had heard about Archangel Raphael, and he, helps with health things. And, and I'd had no information really on it. And I used to kind of scoff at that kind of stuff, but I was like, screw it. I'm withering away, and so I was saying, universe, please help me. Archangel Raphael, if you're there, please help me. And excuse me, all of a sudden I felt this overwhelming feeling of unconditional love. Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Absolutely, no problem. Take as much time as you can. The overwhelming feeling of love is very common in just about all near-death experiences. And I don't want to say all, but I'd rather say many near-death experiences.
Oh yeah, and it's so overwhelming, but you're so at peace. Well, anyway, so I had this overwhelming feeling of unconditional love, and all of a sudden I was in a whole other realm. I was in a whole other place. This world seemed so far away and non-existent to me. You know how, like, when you wake up from a dream, even when you're dreaming about things and you're like, oh, this is really weird and odd, but I'll go along with it, and then you wake up from that dream and you're like, oh, wasn't that crazy that I was like really into believe in all of, all the stress that was going on. Well, it's kind of like that. Like I woke up into this whole other realm, and it was like this place here was just like a play, with actors, and we're all just doing the thing, and how none of it, like don't sweat the small stuff kind of thing.
Right.
So my visuals, what I saw up there, I was standing up on the cliff of this huge canyon. And of course, the colors were amazing. This place seemed so dull compared to the brightness and the colors and the iridescence of where I was. And so to the right of me, there was this being, and they were about a foot, I'm 5'7", and they were about a foot or so taller than me. And the best way I can describe what they were wearing was almost like a Pope's robe, just like a big full robe like that. And it was white, and it had all this gold filigree on it. And then I looked up to their face to look in their face, and it was just bright light, white light. So I couldn't even see anything about their face. It was just bright white light. And I looked, and they were pointing straight ahead of us. And so I turned and looked down into the canyon, and I saw this, what I know now is called the City of Lights. I did not know how to describe it while I was trying to Google. I tried Googling all of this whenever it came out from it, but it's so hard to describe. It's just like this city, and it was just all these lights of lilac and light blue and just trimmed in gold. But it didn't seem like a solid structure. It was just made out of lights, but it was an obvious like village or city just made of lights. And as far as my visuals, that's all that I saw while I was up there. But what I felt again was the unconditional love, and just it was like all these things in my mind unlocked. And I realized I am one with the universe. We are all the same, and it was very life-changing while I was up there.
So this is very interesting, your entire story. First, when we go back to your childhood, there was the uncomfortable Christian religious, fear-based religion that you were brought up in, that you had no interest in. You then go into a more scientific view of energy. And at your time of need, it's as if you almost become Catholic when,
I know, right?
reaching out for the angel Raphael. But nonetheless, you also mentioned that you saw something prior to your near-death experience that could be explained as spiritual. Before I get into your near-death experience questions, can we just go back to that? Can you just explain what it was exactly that you saw?
Well, on October 31st, when I was having that panic attack, it was just like there was blinding gold light to the left of me. I didn't turn my head and look at it. But it was just this blinding gold light that came from somewhere else, it just appeared. And because I honestly had my eyes closed because I was in so much pain, I was squeezing and clenching my eyes closed, but I just knew that there was this gold light, and I kind of got a peek of it, a little bit, but it was mainly to that voice saying not one more drop of alcohol. And it was a feminine voice, and they said it very lovingly. It wasn't judgmental or anything like that. It was just, this is what you need to do, because we care about you.
Right. Now, was that voice audible, or would you say it was more telepathic, innate?
I think it was more audible. That was also a very profound experience as well. Again, like I said, I haven't even touched alcohol at all. And I started become a heavy drinker at the age of 21, and for 20 years I was a daily drinker, and I haven't touched it.
So moving into your experience, I know you saw the image of an entity that was in a robe. Was there any kind of communication while you were there?
No, the only communication was of them pointing. They did seem like they were more like maybe a masculine entity, if I had to choose the energy that was coming off of them, but it was very loving. And the only communication was as I looked up at them, they pointed my attention into the direction into the canyon.
And you mentioned seeing lights, which you refer to as City of Lights. I know going back to your experience where you heard the voice telling you not to take another drink of alcohol, you also saw lights. Were these lights equivalent to the lights you saw in your experience?
I don't think so. No, the gold light was different. The lights that I saw during my experience, I would say, even though there was gold trim lights in my experience, it was different. I don't know quite how to explain it, but
Now, during your near-death experience, did you feel as if, I know you stated earlier that you felt as if you were one with everything. Did you receive any special knowledge, or did you feel like you had more knowledge than you would have had prior to going into your near-death experience?
Well, it's more, I had a lot of the surface knowledge, a lot of the, sacred geometry and all that stuff. You see the lines on a leaf are the same lines, on the palm of your hand kind of thing. I've always been somebody who always wanted to get to the bottom of things. So I have been researching religions and, quantum physics and all of that since I was young, but I never had anything click that made it click in my being to where, now that I know that we are all one, like the profound knowledge of that we are all energy, our actions are energy, our thoughts are energy. Like I live my life a totally different way now. I am so aware of my thoughts. And how I speak to people, the energy that I give off. Like I totally, like it was a knock in the head, or a knock in the heart, just opened up my heart and made me realize to flow through this life. Like Bruce Lee said, you got to be water, you got to be fluid. And so, yeah, it seems like it's a very small piece of information, but it changed my whole world.
At any given time, did you feel while you were there that you wanted to return, or did you feel that you just wanted to be uh, in this particular realm forever?
Well, I will say I felt very detached, like I could have just left everything behind. I've dealt with extreme crippling anxiety since I was a child, and depression, and also body pain that's hard to get under control. And, I had never, the way that I felt up there, like it was the first time in my life that I felt like I had been released of all of those feelings. So of course, I was enjoying the moment, but it did happen very quickly. So it wasn't enough for me to think about like, oh, I could live here, I could hang out for a lot longer than I want.
What was it like returning to your body? And at any point in time, did you make it to a hospital to get a verification on your health condition?
Well, yes, I had been going to the hospital quite a bit from between October 31st through like March probably. But yeah, next thing I know, after seeing the City of Lights and everything, next thing I know, I'm waking up on my couch. It's the next morning. And I honestly was blissed the F out. I hadn't really read about I mean, I've always heard, raising your vibration, high vibes, and all this stuff. But it's so true. Like, I was so high vibrational off of that experience. And, it honestly is what kept me alive. I still wasn't able to eat a whole lot after having that severe, stomach inflammation. I was still having the inflammation, but it mentally got me through that hard time. Yeah. And then, of course, my brain, I wanted to know everything about what I experienced. So I just constantly was Googling, everything I could think of. And I did go to see some doctors, and I told them about the experience. And it was kind of funny because most of them would just kind of nod and just like type it into their computer, but really wouldn't ask too many follow-up questions about it.
Sure. As many in the scientific community, I believe, are just now starting to latch on to this notion, to this phenomenon of near-death experiences. That a lot of them are still lagging behind, but there are a number of doctors and scientists who are starting to realize, hey, wait a minute, perhaps we do have something here that's beyond the three-dimensional realm we live in, because you have to understand there have been scientists and doctors who have had near-death experiences themselves. So many near-death experiencers talk about after effects, coming back with higher empathy levels. Perhaps they have a bit of precognition. I know you mentioned your vibration being raised. Did you notice anything else different after you returned?
Oh, yeah. Like, I no longer had any attachments. Like, one of my biggest fears was losing my house. Like, my anxiety would always, that would be the end game. Oh, this unexpected bill has come up, and and it would always end up like, oh, I don't have enough money, and then I can't afford my house and all this stuff. And I'm super attached to my cat, Nimbly. But I know now that everything's going to be fine. She's going to be able to, when she passes, she's going to be able to experience this amazing feeling as well, because she's a little soul experiencing this place as well. And, so I honestly kind of felt like, if I didn't have her, she is honestly my emotional support animal. So I did grow pretty attached to her, but now it's like I've learned that you can't have that attachment. But yeah, right afterwards, I was like, you know what? I could go live in a, monastery and not have, like, my want for anything is gone. Not that I was never really materialistic, but it was just like, I don't need anything as long as I can sit and meditate and be one with that unconditional love. Nothing else really matters, other than, loving and giving compassion to other people and empathy and everything like that, and just trying to spread that. Yeah, I was ready to run away to be with the monks, after that happened.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that, because the need for materialism seems to diminish after near-death experiences, according to a number of near-death experiencers and their after effects. Now, you did mention earlier that you were diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. At what age were you diagnosed with that?
Well, funny enough, I have been pretty suspicious of it for a good 10-15 years, but I was always way too overwhelmed to even go see a therapist, psychiatrist, or anybody, because I'm actually surprised that I'm even doing this interview. There's no way 2 or 3 years ago I would have even been able to have done this interview. I would have been too caught up in my anxiety and my layered thoughts and not being able to express them properly. So after I came back from my experience, again, I felt like I was totally cleansed. I was saying all of those Christian words. I was like, I feel reborn. I feel born again. I was like, oh, born again. That's what they, Christians say.
Right.
but yeah, I totally felt cleansed of a lot of my hangups up there. And so I've got to a point where I was like, okay, let me go get this checked out. And it's actually just it's only been about 6 months or so. But again, that doesn't mean that obviously it's high functioning, but I'm a troubleshooter. I love finding patterns and everything. And that I finally had to start looking at the patterns of myself and being like, okay, is this my anxiety or is this some kind of autism thing? You know, because I've learned in a lot of either work relationships or just meeting strangers on the street, whenever I'm trying to find when I'm asking questions and I'm just trying to get to the bottom of things so I can understand and not feel lost or confused. Some people find that problematic or think that I'm being problematic. And I needed some answers for that. So I'm very grateful that I was finally able to go and talk about it. I mean, I should have been in therapy when I was 10 years old, you know what I mean? And I just never went. I used alcohol to just live another day. Yeah.
And the reason why I just bring that up is because clearly I don't think there's been any studies on autism or the connection between autism and near-death experiences. However, a world-renowned psychiatrist by the name of Dr. Bruce Grayson, who's published, relentlessly on the topic of near-death experiences, has stated in his recent book entitled After that, after doing several surveys and doing research on several patients that were diagnosed with various mental health issues, he determined that, people with mental diagnosis had near-death experiences no more or less often than do people in the general population. So again, your diagnosis clearly didn't affect you from having a near-death experience, nor did it seem to affect the quality of it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I know you mentioned on a near-death experience group chat that you posted a question about dating. How has that changed? And how is that in connection with your near-death experience?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I thought I was particular before, because, I have finally accepted that I'm asexual. I accepted that quite a few years ago. And of course, that never really worked in regular relationships. And I do believe that asexualism is tied to being being on the autism spectrum, because you do see that a lot in autistic people. Not, I don't have a percentage, but they're just very logical people, don't like to be touched, kind of thing. That's where I'm at. But so now I'm like, okay, I would like to have a partner who is also asexual and, maybe on the autism spectrum, so they can like nerd out with me on, and, data and information. And now it's like, it's the perspective that I have, man, I guess it can be taught, and I'm not trying to sound pretentious at all, but it's just, I need somebody who knows to not sweat the small stuff, that, this is just a blip in our existence, that there is so much more to be had after this life as well. So to not take things so seriously. And yeah, so now I'm like, okay, I guess I'm going to have to add a near-death experiencer onto my list of potential mates.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So going back to the religious question, now that you've had your near-death experience, has your views changed on religion at all, or spirituality, or not much?
Oh yeah, they've changed. And I will say that they've kind of changed throughout the years, because I like to get new information and then make my decision on that. But I've never been 100% on anything. I'll like lean more heavily towards one idea or not. But now I will say, I have found a lot of commonalities now, or I kind of understand what they were trying to say in my church growing up, but they were saying it maybe the wrong way. Like I was saying, the whole born again thing in my mind, after I woke up from this, I was like, I I still have this cleansed, born again feeling, and I was blissed out for months, and I didn't ask Jesus to save my soul or save me of my sins. So, and I'm not hating on Jesus at all or anything like that, but I'm saying, oh my God, it is possible to have this feeling that the Christians talk about when they get saved, without going the A to B route that the Christians say is the only way. So that gave me a lot of perspective. And also, again, they always preached about the rapture and end times growing up. And I started making some other connections. It's kind of funny. I've been reading the Bible. I haven't read the Bible in like over 30 years, and I dusted off my Bible from, the 80s. And I've been, it's kind of like, once you kind of know the code, it's like you can read between the lines there. And I do think, like, whenever it comes to, the talk of rapture, of the rapture, and how everybody goes up into the sky, like Jesus comes back and everybody will rise up into the sky. I'm like, holy crap. I believe that it's more of the crystalline energy that comes back, and not necessarily us physically raising up into the sky. It's more about us raising our vibration and being on a higher frequency, that frequency of unconditional love. And that's how we get peace on earth. Because if everybody is feeling unconditional love, we're not going to be having the problems that we have today, and then again, it's the whole, I believe in ego death, and the line in a scripture, the meek shall inherit the earth. I'm like, oh yeah, the meek who have had major ego deaths, yeah, like, so I'm connecting dots these days again in a different perspective. It's been pretty awesome, actually.
Well, it certainly sounds like you died, had a near-death experience, and came back an enlightened theologian.
Well, I'm trying.
Well, with that said, Lucy, I want to thank you for coming on Real Spiritual Talk Radio and sharing with us your absolutely fascinating account.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to be here.
Ladies and gentlemen, Lucy Lockdown.